Going to begin the Planning Commission and Board of Adjustment meeting on Tuesday, June 11th at 7 p.m. We are going to start with a call to order and then move on to a roll call. Peter, would you mind taking that for us?
All right. Ayers.
Here.
Zierden.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Brisbane. Here. Tice.
Here.
All right, we're going to move to Pledge of Allegiance, so please all rise. I pledge the allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And we're going to move on to approval and amendment of the agenda. First, do we have any changes or adjustments to the agenda? No. And do we have a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion has passed. We're going to move on to the next item, which is an open forum. So if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak about an item that is not on the agenda, feel free to approach the podium, state your name and address. And if you have an item that is on the agenda, we'll give you an opportunity to speak on that when we get to that point. So if anyone would like to approach the podium, please do so now. All right, I don't see anyone raising their hand or approaching, so we're going to close the open forum and move on to approval of minutes. We have first item, which is the April 9th regular planning meeting, Commission Board of Adjustment meeting minutes. Do we have any changes to that or motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the April 9th.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion has passed, and we'll move on to approval of the minutes for May 14th, regular Planning Commission Board of Adjustments meeting. Do we have any changes or a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, moving on to new business. So we're going to start with item number A on the agenda, which is the variance application V24001. It is, I may say this incorrectly, so I apologize, the Suez Family Trust on Lot 55, Block 2, White Birch 7. We're going to start with the staff report and review. Peter, if you would mind taking this.
Madam Chair, members of the board, variance application V24001 for Linda and Larry Suarez, property address 30392 Circle Creek. The property is zoned R1, low density residential. The applicant has filed the appropriate application for an after-the-fact variance. The applicant has paid the appropriate fee for the application, and the public hearing was properly noticed with a 350-foot mailing radius. No neighbor comments were received from the office at this time, and public notice was not given to the DNR as the property is not located in a shoreline overlay district. The variance request is an after-the-fact from the required side yard setback of 15 feet to 12 feet for an existing residential structure. Summary of the property includes the property was platted in 1979 and is located on Circle Creek on the White Birch Drive. The property is in a residential neighborhood bordered by a golf course, which is also zoned resort commercial. The residence was built in 2021 and built under the ownership of a Kurt Hawkinson. The property boundary was surveyed after the build, and that is when the setback encroachment was identified. The current owner did not build the structure and is before the commission today seeking relief from the required property line setback for an after-the-fact variance. If the commission applies the strict interpretation of Chapter 153 and the codes of the city, the applicant at their own expense would be required to remove the existing encroachment from within the setback at the landowner's expense. Due to the de minimis nature of the encroachment, staff recommends the commission consider approval of an after-the-fact variance based on the information presented to the office at this time. There are currently no recommended findings from staff on the variance application. Also attached in the memo is the findings of fact. All of those questions need to be answered yes in order to approve the variance. And in the memo, there's a summary of that, and we can read through the findings at the appropriate time for that. That concludes the staff report. If you have any questions, please ask.
It's a sewer lot, right? Has city sewer?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Does anyone have any current questions before we move on to the applicant presentation? All right. If the applicant or representative would please approach and state their name and address, please.
Linda Suarez, and the address,
Yes, please.
30392 Creek Circle, in Breezy Point.
All right, and if you would just kind of walk us through your request, that would be wonderful.
Okay. We purchased the house in October 2021, and apparently there had not been a survey done by the builder. We did not know that. We didn't know there was anything with the property line until this last November. Somebody was buying the property, the empty lot next to us, and they had a survey done. At that time, it was found that our well was actually over the property line. And so since that time, the well has been moved. We moved our well. And we noticed that the property, we thought that the setback was originally 10 feet, but then we looked it up and everything, and it found out it was 15 feet. And so we thought that one corner of the garage was close to that. And when we measured it, then we thought it was definitely like around 12 feet. So then we had a survey done, and it came back and said it was like 12 feet. So it's that little corner of the garage.
Does anyone here have some questions?
I got a question for Peter again.
Go ahead.
So this is R1, which is a 15-foot setback. R2 and 3 has a 10-foot setback, all three being sewered. Oh, I guess I could ask why.
Setbacks are determined on the zoning classification, and at the
Right.
time when the ordinances were adopted, I wasn't here for that, but it's not uncommon to have as you get to say a larger zoning class, or a more rural one, to increase the setbacks. Like wooded residential has like a 30-foot property line
Right,
setback.
yeah.
So that's the idea there. And then sometimes people get confused on the zoning chart because when they butt up to another different zoning district, like if there's an R1 and an R2, it'll actually take the more restrictive setback in that situation. So
I'm assuming that's all R1.
that all is there. Mhm,
Okay.
correct.
Does anyone else have questions for the applicant at this time? We may call you back if we do have more later on. Thank you. All right, the next item or next role here would be an open forum for public input. So if anyone in the audience would like to approach the podium, state their name and address, you're free to voice any questions or concerns you have.
She's scared. Judy Meyer, 30482 Creek Circle. I just have a question. The permit, the building permit, I think, was okayed by Breezy Point, right? Do you guys not check for setbacks? Do you not require surveys? I mean, these people went into this, the builder built this. I'd be worried if I wanted to build something up here and ran into the problem they did. I mean, they had to pay for their own well because the builder ghosted them. and now they're having to worry about this variance. I mean, sorry, I'm just kind of questioning what your rules and regulations are, if you have any in place as far as requiring surveys. And then also, because my son-in-law built our house down the road, he said that there's a possibility that the markings were made, because I think the county maybe was involved to come out and to make sure that the setbacks were met, but they can move those, and nobody checks after that. So, just an FYI for the future. I think you maybe need to kind of look at stuff like that.
Well, I cannot comment totally on our process. I know I've gone through building permits just to build on my house, and we submit surveys and all of that ahead of time to get the permit. Peter, is there more that you can share?
Yeah, I can certainly speak to that. Could I get your name again?
Judy
Judy,
Meyer,
and your address?
304 A2 Creek Circle.
Okay, I got that. Thanks, Judy. Yeah, all of the above. Surveys are required for building within the city, and what happens, we issue many permits and been doing this for a long time, and people move stakes, information, people make mistakes and things like that, whereas in this was surveyed out and the excavator comes up and they start pouring walls and everything like that, and survey stakes get knocked over by construction equipment. It doesn't happen all the time, but it certainly is not rare. A lot of places will require as well too an afterward survey, but at the same time, the questions asked is, how many times does this property need to be surveyed, during a construction process? Typically, it's at the beginning, and then they pin for the excavation. And then when that's done, nobody visits the property until much later on, because everything's supposed to be in the place. So, and how this can kind of roll out too is the prior developer could possibly be liable for misinformation on that. So and at the same time in development too, a lot of people get surveys of the property before they make that initial investment on the property. So, but to answer your question in the most basic form is, yes, absolutely surveys are required, but as the construction process moves forward, sometimes the stakes can get knocked over by the excavators doing the work.
Well, I'm not sure if the well was built, dug before the property was excavated on this property. Because is a well driller at all liable?
A well driller?
What do they just go witch and well and all of a sudden decide to dig a hole?
The property owner is responsible for everything at the end of the day, absolutely. So yeah, like if you come in and say, we have to go with landowner testimony, the well driller has to go with, like, if you're a property owner representing your property and say, drill a well here, they're gonna do that, I've had homeowners move survey stakes on purpose. They've come out during the process and they physically move them and think it's going to change the boundary. And sometimes, you catch that and say, hey, this is not indeed the case. But yeah, at the end of the day, we have to go with what the homeowner says on the project. So.
Well, in my opinion, it's kind of scary if they can do that, and if nobody catches it, in maybe this situation.
This is a little more rare of a situation. This is not common. But however, it's not ultimately extremely uncommon as well too. There's communities that do not require surveys at all for construction. And I know because I've worked in those communities before, and the answer is they don't want to pay for surveys before they start building. And what happens is a lot of expensive mistakes get made, and it's tough on the landowner because you're trusting in a system that's you're thinking that's there, and in some areas it's not. Like, I'm pretty certain that in the greater part of the county, surveys are not required for residential structures.
Okay.
But
Pretty
very
much
good
answered.
questions. Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
No, thanks.
Thank you, Judy. Is there anyone else I'd like to approach? All right, we're going to close the open forum portion and move on to deliberation. So as the commission reviews the criteria, I'm going to go ahead and read kind of the notice of decision and findings of facts so that we have something to review and discuss. So the first thing on here is the Planning Commission shall consider the following in our decision to make written findings concerning the variance approval or denial. Number one, the strict interpretation of the ordinance would be impractical because of circumstances related to lot size, shape, topographic, or other characteristics of the property that were not created by the landowner. And in this case, we answer yes, the encroachment was created by a prior landowner. Number two, criteria for us to consider is a deviation from the ordinance with any attached conditions will still be in keeping with the spirit and intent of the ordinance. And our findings is yes, the encroachment into the setback is minimal. Number three, the land use created by the variance is permitted in the zoning district where the property is located. And yes, this is a seasonal year-round residential use. It is allowed in this zoning district. Number four, the variance will not alter the essential character of the locality. And we find yes, that the proposed request is in a residential that's similar to adjacent neighbors. And the fifth, the variance is not for economic reasons alone, but for reasonable use of the property, that reasonable use does not exist under the current ordinance. And yes, we found that the existing owners did not create this encroachment. The prior owner did. If we had a strict application of the ordinance and it was applied, the existing owners would be required to remove the encroaching elements of the structure at their expense. At this time, we kind of reviewed what the recommended conditions are, and we had no other conditions. So those are the findings of the fact that we need to review and interpret and have answered yes in order to approve this variance. So in looking at the rest of the commission, does anyone have questions, debates, or concerns about that?
No.
All right. Does anyone want to make a motion at this time?
I'll make a motion to approve V-24-001. Basically saying the 12-foot setback is good.
Is approved under these
Is
conditions.
approved, right.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion has passed. So we are moving on to the next item of business, which is a conditional use permit application C24003. This is with Daniel and Lisa Anderson that is located at 31945 Harvest Road. So we will start with the staff report.
Madam Chair, members of the board, subdivision, I don't want subdivision. This is the conditional use permit. Okay. Conditional use permit C24003 for Daniel and Lisa Anderson, address 31945 Harvest Road. And the property is zoned R2, medium density residential. The applicant has filed the appropriate application for conditional use permit request and has paid the appropriate fee for the application. Public notice of the hearing was published in the newspaper and notice was sent out to the neighboring properties. No notices were received back from neighbor comments at this time. Public notice was not given to the DNR as it is not in the Shoreland Overlay District. The applicant is requesting a conditional use request to construct a 38 by 36 accessory structure, whereas in the R2 zoning district, any accessory structure over 1,200 square feet requires a conditional use permit. And a summary of the property includes the White Birch 16 is located at the intersection of Harvest Road and Bushman Road. The property and adjacent properties are platted residential development. The zoning classification for the property is R2. This zoning classification does require the conditional use permit for accessory structures over, 1,280 square feet actually. And the applicant has met with the zoning administrator in preparation for this meeting with a pre-application meeting to present their plans. Site topography, access, and lot configuration appear to be suitable for the proposed use and consistent with the comprehensive land use plan, which encourages residential development in the areas within this zoning classification. Property is zoned R. The property request is allowed as a conditional use permit in the R2 zoning under the land use category chart, section 153044, and based on the information presented at this time, staff recommends approval with no conditions. And that concludes the staff report. If you have any questions, please ask.
I just have one those two little sheds are existing, right?
I believe so.
Okay.
If,
Then there's one to be moved, I see.
the applicant, I think he can speak
Oh,
to that.
okay. Right.
When,
Dan Anderson, 31945 Harvest Road. So, yes, the two sheds are existing. The smaller one will be removed to
Okay.
get down to the 1,600.
Okay.
There's one slight change in the plan that I dropped with Peter today after meeting with the excavator and the surveyor. The distance from Bushman is reduced to 37 feet, well within the setback. I gave a site plan to Peter today. By meeting with the excavator and the surveyor, just worked better for drainage. I think Peter gave you copies of that site plan.
Is there anything else on the application that you'd like to kind of walk us through?
No, it's just, when we bought the property, we bought the next lot for the garage for storage there, so, there'll be minimum traffic, I met with, the maintenance, so I'll provide a culvert along Harvest Court to maintain drainage along that ditch. Very minimal impact to the property or neighborhood as far as traffic or anything.
I like the height of the shed. It isn't something that's 16 feet up in the air.
I
with a-
kept it low, just first aesthetics and to meet the conditions of the permit too, yeah.
Yeah. Doesn't look like an airport hangar.
Right, so,
And I'm guessing you'll kind of match existing.
match, yep.
Does anyone have questions or want more time to review? All right, thank you.
Yep.
And then moving on to the next item, which is opening it up for public input. So if anyone in the audience has questions, comments, concerns, please approach the podium, state your name and address, and feel free to share. All right, I don't see anyone approaching, so we're going to close the open forum portion and move on to deliberation. I'm going to take this as an opportunity to review the findings that we are required to address and answer. So number one, upon review of a conditional use application, the commission needs to consider the findings as required in section 153.11E. In review, the commission should state whether or not the findings are acceptable towards granting the conditional use permit if applicable. So the following findings must be met. A, the use or development is an appropriate conditional use in the land use zone. And we have found that the property is zoned R2 and the request is appropriate as per section 153.004 and 153.032. B, the use or development with conditions conforms to the comprehensive land use plan. We found that accessory structures conform to residential development. It is consistent with the comp plan. C, the use with conditions is compatible with the existing neighborhood. We have found that the proposed use is residential and it is similar to surrounding properties. D, the use with conditions would not be injurious to the public health, safety, welfare, decency, order, comfort, convenience, appearance, or prosperity of the city. Also, number two, the following must be considered. A, the conditional use should not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity for the purpose permitted on that property, nor substantially diminish or impair property values in the immediate vicinity. And also B, the conditional use should not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of surrounding vacant property for use predominant in the area. As well as C, the conditional use will not create an excessive additional requirements at public cost for public facilities and services and will not be detrimental to the economic welfare of the community. We found that the use does not require any additional public infrastructure. D, the conditional use will have vehicular approaches to the property which are so designed as to not create traffic congestion or an interference with traffic on surrounding public thoroughfares. We found that the proposed use is keeping with the residential character of the neighborhood and creates a nominal additional traffic flow. E, adequate measures have been taken to provide sufficient off-street parking and loading space to serve the proposed use. We found that the use is keeping within the residential character of the neighborhood, creating nominal additional parking or loading requirements. F, adequate measures have been taken or will be taken to prevent or control offensive odors, fumes, dust, noise, vibrations, so none of these will constitute a nuisance, and to control lights and signage in such a manner that no disturbance to the neighboring properties will be resulting. The proposed use we find is in keeping with the residential character of the neighborhood. No commercial use of the property is proposed as part of this condition of the conditional use permit. G, the conditional use permit will not result in the destruction, loss, or damage of a natural, scenic, or historic feature of major significance. And also, the conditional use will promote the prevention and control of pollution on the ground and surface waters, including sedimentation and control of nutrients. So we have found those conditions all to be within use of the conditional use permit. There are no recommended conditions at this time. So that is a review of our findings. Is there any questions or concerns in addition to that from the commission?
I just have a question for Peter. Is there a reason that this is a CUP and not a variance?
That's a great question, and I probably should have spoke a little bit more to that in the staff report. Yeah, the variances like what we heard before, dimensional setbacks and things like that. This is a conditional use permit for the accessory structures, and I think kind of some of the genesis or why it's a conditional use permit is the city wants to have some control of the large accessory structures, where it goes before a board where you can review it for like site screening and placement on the lot and things like that. So, yeah, and then there's a limit to 1,600 square feet, and it's kind of a good example for myself and other areas where I've worked where they don't have those restrictions. People would put these huge pole barns on residential lots. So, and that'll be something as we go through the ordinance update process in the staff report later on. We'll speak a little bit about that too, because perhaps it's time to review that as well too. So.
So being that it's under 1,600 square feet, does it really need a conditional use permit?
Well, they need a conditional use permit between 1,280 to
Got it.
1,600. So if they said we want to go over 1,600,
Yep.
the answer we'd have to say they can't do that.
Correct.
Then that would be a variance because it would be like a dimensional standard.
Understanding how,
And-
yeah.
So, yeah, very good question.
Any other questions?
Is there currently any foliage or trees or anything that's going to be removed?
I've done some removal of trees for the building site.
Okay, so is there some screening in front of that from the road, from Harvest Court?
See that again?
If you're on Harvest Court looking into your property, is there still trees or anything there that will screen the building?
Yes.
Okay,
When we're done, we're gonna probably find some more for screening for Bushman and for Harvest Court.
okay.
I just thought of something, Peter, they were talking of moving Bushman over a little bit when they update it, and I thought it was moving south. That wouldn't affect this.
I don't think so, and those road projects I don't want to say are up in the air, but they're so subject to right-of-way acquisition and things like that,
Right, okay,
so, but yeah, there was some discussion with that, but I don't think it will
okay.
affect his.
I did talk to the city, and I'm a civil engineer, and that land adjacent isn't, it's a easement for the power line. So
Oh.
even if they widen or put a bike trail, it
So-
wouldn't affect that.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions? Do we have any motions?
I would move the approval of this application.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion has passed. And now we're moving on to the final new business item, which is the subdivision application S24002 of Greg and Roseanne Hagelin. That part of government lot number 2, section 1, township 135, range 28 of Crow Wing County. So we will start with the staff report.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, subdivision S24002, applicant Greg Hegland. There is no current address as the property is still rural without a E911 address. The property is zoned wooded residential. The applicant has filed the appropriate fee for the preliminary plat and the appropriate application for preliminary plat. Public notice of the hearing was published in the newspaper, and also notice was given to the neighbors within the required radius. Public notice also was given to the DNR via email, as the property is within the Shoreland Overlay District. We did receive to date one public comment, which I can read into the commission at the public comment period. And the subdivision request, the applicant's looking to subdivide 2 lots of record into a 7-lot preliminary plat for rural residential development. Summary of the property includes that part of government lot 2, section 1, township 136, range 28, is located near the northeast corner of the city limits on the south side of Fawn Lake Road. The property is currently unplatted rural land. The zoning classification for the property, which is wooded residential, is a zoning classification that requires 5-acre minimum lot size, and residential development is an allowed use. The subject property also falls within the Shoreland Overlay District due to the proximity of Fawn Lake Public Waters, which is a 1,000-foot overlay district from the lake. Wooded residential property is a low-density zoning classification, and residential development of this zoning class is supported in the comprehensive land management plan. The applicant and surveyor met with the zoning administrator per the subdivision ordinance required pre-application meeting to present their plans before the public hearing today. The applicant has done that. The applicant's concept plan is to develop the 6 lots that are roughly into 5 acres or more in size, and 1 tract that is roughly larger than 26 acres in size. Site consists of variable topographic features, including a large wetland and steep slopes. The lots proposed do meet the required SST requirements for their own individual on-site septic systems, as the property will not be serviced at this time for the city sewer line. The property does exceed the performance standards required for minimum buildable areas, as they are very large lots, and the site suitability is very good for residential development, and the areas are also meeting all setbacks for residential or seasonal dwellings. DNR has been notified as the project lies within the zoning, and we did not receive a comment back from the DNR, aside from the public waters overlay on where that limit ends on Little Osawatomie Lake, which is outside of the boundary of this property. The city also noticed Crow Wing County, as the proposed development is accessed from a public road that is a county road right-of-way. And the county's comment from Matt Calroos, the transportation planner for Crow Wing County. Good morning, planning and zoning. Please find the Crow Wing County Highway Department's comments below regarding the Fawn Lake preliminary plat. The proposed preliminary plat has no adverse effects on the county road system. The attached preliminary plat meets all the requirements we worked with the applicant on, which focused on access points for the lots and having shared access for the lots as shown on the preliminary plat. Sincerely, Matt Calroos. And also, I believe he is present at the meeting. If there is any questions for road right-of-way related comments, I would direct them towards the county transportation planner. If he feels you need to speak, certainly do so as well too. The access points as presented right now at this time, lots 1 and 2 will share access points. Lots 3 and 4 will also share access points. Lots 6 and 7 will also share access points off of Fawn Lake Road. Lot 5 will retain its own individual access point for Fawn Lake Road with a driveway location to be determined in the future. The reason why this is done is to consolidate the access points on this area of the road due to public safety and traffic sightlines, which were concerns brought forth from the county engineering department during the pre-application meeting. Also, per chapter 152, the park dedication fee is required per the following. It is determined that the parkland dedication fee is 10% of the market value of the land to be subdivided, or a combination of land and payment equal to 10% at that time considered at the city council at the final plat approval. The site topography of the lot, access, lot configuration, all appear to be very suitable for the proposed use and is consistent with the comprehensive land use plan, which encourages residential development in these areas within the zoning classification. The R4 zoning and the request is allowed with a conditional use under the land use category charts 153044. That concludes the staff report. Now, we've had a couple different applications tonight. We had a variance, we had a conditional use permit. This is a preliminary plat, so we do have findings for the board to consider, but all you need to do is vote to either recommend this to city council, or if you remand it back to the applicant for further changes and considerations. So we don't need to deliberate on each of the findings unless the board feels that some of them are not addressed. Then certainly it is absolutely appropriate to do so as well. If you got any questions on that, just give me a yell, or any questions about the application or what we should put up on the screen for the presentation, let me know.
Madam Chairman, question for Peter. I am correct that none of these lots have access to Fawn Lake.
Currently, I don't believe there's any access points on the properties right now. The applicant can speak on that when it's their time to come up, but now they are proposing to have access points for all of the properties, but they're going to be shared access points within the right-of-way. And,
The lake.
oh, I'm
lake,
sorry.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay. There's no access. Yeah, there's no shared access outlots to that, so, sorry about that. I
No, it's
was
okay.
Thinking the different access. On the DNR map that's up on the screen, perfect, Deb, that one right there. That red line sometimes public waters extend into dry areas because there's meandered waterways and non-meandered waterways, and that can significantly affect land use regulations very much because it pulls something into not only Lakeshore District, but also riparian lands, which has, some different standards. What the DNR was showing right there from the area hydro, Jacob Free, he was showing there's a beaver dam there that has essentially blocked the water for many, many, many years. So all of the property to the east of that, which is behind Mr. Heglin's subdivision and part of the property, is definitely not located in any public waters area. But it is not uncommon if you see later like an ordinary high water level on some lakes, not as many in the Breezy Point area, but if you get into maybe more swampier counties and stuff like that, public waters can extend way back into a wetland, and then a setback's applied, lot sizes are applied, and oftentimes landowners are like, I'm looking at a swamp, I didn't know this was lakeshore status, so that's something to be considered. So, and I think the DNR addressed it for us appropriately, so. And believe it or not, the blurry map that was in your packet, which is the next one down, if we just scroll down, that's the public waters inventory map. It looks very primitive, but it has a legal presence that's the map that goes, if anything goes to appeal to the DNR in St. Paul. That was the map that was adopted back when the state established the public waters. There was litigation to everything from the DNR possibly looking at, because there's the setbacks applied to the lake, and it even looked at that time on taking property around the lake instead of establishing the setback. So that map, I think, came up in like the 60s, and references all of the public water bodies in the state. So I believe this lake was probably called Rat Lake at one time, which is where it says it that. I think it was changed to Little Osawatomie. So, but that's kind of a little description on the ink drawing there that looks kind of strange, but.
Okay.
Does anyone have more questions at this time for Peter before we bring up the applicant? All right. I invite the applicant to please approach the podium with your name and address.
Greg Haglund, 13747 Sandy Shores Road in Cross Lake.
And if you could just walk us through your application, any questions and things of that nature, please.
Sure. Well, Peter did a good job overviewing the project, but my wife and I own approximately 57 acres, non-lake shore, that we are within the zoning subdivision chapter, looking to subdivide this into 7 lots.
And just curious, is your intention to sell each lot, or do you do any building on those lots?
No, I'm retired. I'm just
Okay.
looking to divide this up and sell the lots.
So lot 5 is access through that narrow band?
That's actually part of the proposed lot. That would be
Right, I
their
see that.
access to get back there. That's a challenging part of the property in terms of subdividing that and trying to figure out, I mean, we could have gotten a few other buildable sites, but with the 5-acre minimum, because of the topography changes there, it just didn't make sense. But there's 33-foot minimum on a public roadway. We left that intentionally wide enough so that 50 years from now, if somebody wants to put a street back there and further divide that, there is room for that. So we always try to think ahead.
That lot 5 has a lot of grade, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It must drop a lot.
If you look, the numbers are small there, but if you blow that up, I think there's about 20-plus foot
Yeah.
of variation. Great for deer hunting, but tough for splitting it up for additional housing. So I think it'll make a really nice spot for somebody that wants some elbow room, build a house there overlooking one of those holes.
So I see you have 40 by 60 pads that for the homes projecting?
Well, Peter had asked for where a potential building pad would be, garage and
Right.
house. So the surveyor put that in there as just kind of an approximate. With 5 acres, there's a lot of place, that was just kind of a guess,
Yeah.
It's more of a proof of concept.
yeah.
I was thinking maybe they're pads for sheds.
No, he wanted a building,
Yeah,
a home site drawn in there.
right.
Does anyone have any further questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we move on to an open forum. So this is an invitation for anyone in the audience to approach the podium, state your name and address, and feel free to share any questions, concerns, or thoughts.
Oh, I'm Tony File. My address is 27177 County Road 107, Pequot Lakes. I am the landowner to the east of that property. And I have concerns about the development. I have the Honey Wagon, I represent the Honey Wagon Septic Company, and that is our land application site where we spread our sewage and farm that land. And I'm afraid that with the increased density, that we're gonna have increased complaints. It's happened before, and we've used that land for 20 years. We own the land, and we don't intend to stop using it. As you know, that one or two unhappy people in a township can create a bunch of problems for city councils and mayors. We don't have the option to take our sewage to the wastewater treatment plants because with the urban sprawl that's happened, they're already at capacity. They weren't designed with septage receiving stations when they were built. We've had complaints about different properties before, and it's time-consuming. Minnesota Pollution Control's come out, they're a governing agency, and we've met with them, and they've found the complaints to be unfounded, but yet they are still complaints, and they're very time-consuming for the agency and for the townships, and especially for the mayor. I don't know if you've ever had complainers, but they do kind of act like a mosquito in a tent. They don't seem to go away, and they do bother you a lot. I believe it's important that we protect our land application sites for septage. Minnesota Pollution Control and the monitors what we do. The Environmental Protection Agency also is involved, and we do it with best management practices. We try hard, but like I said, I'm just concerned that more density would cause more problems. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman? Deb, is the cursor on his land right now? Oh, okay.
It's
77060514.
515,
One over, left.
14,
I believe that's what he said.
Right there, okay.
so right
excuse me.
Did anyone have further questions on any? Okay. I believe there's another lady that would like to come up.
Hi, I'm Kathy Stultz. My local address is 12152 Fawn Lake Road. I'm still a full-time resident of the cities, but retirement has changed that. I have a couple of observations or comments really to share. I didn't have the opportunity ahead of time to know the extent of the application. So I tend to chew on things and may come up with some more questions later, but I appreciate this opportunity. Of note, though, when I purchased my property, which is on the north side of Fawn Lake Road, when you look at the drawing, the westernmost piece of land, I own the 3 parcels across from that. When I bought the land, or when I bought the cabin, rather, it was a beautiful, 80 wooded acres, and I knew it was a pipe dream to think that would last forever. So I'm not surprised that somebody has chosen to try to develop that land. And I don't love it, but it's appropriate, and I understand that. I didn't realize, though, until after it had occurred, I appreciate this meeting, I don't remember receiving notice of the original meeting that subdivided the 80 acres into what is now a 5-acre owned piece of land, and then these 2 larger parcels. So I just mentioned that there may be a fly in the ointment there in terms of getting out notification, because when I heard the applicant say, make reference to the 2 pieces of property, I always knew it to be 1, and so that has changed. The survey itself, there was a different image that showed, I think, the survey lines. I don't know if you're able to bring that up. I have a personal concern about that, that I'd just like to put out in the world. There's a road there, right? The road cuts through, and the road and the property lines, yeah, just scroll up a little bit, or scroll down. Fawn Lake Road turns south to the southwest. So shift it that way. And I think if I'm interpreting it right, those dots and that black line are actually on my parcels. So I think they're associated with the pieces of land that you're talking about today, but they live on the north side of the road, and I have structure on them. I bought structure already living on them. So it confuses me to continue to see these property lines this way, and I don't know if anything can be done about that, but FYI. Should I pause there for a minute? Is there any observation or assurances anybody can give me that I don't have to cede part of my garage?
The board can't address property line boundaries, you know, that would be done through a licensed surveyor, and where the land lies within the survey is largely where it is, so I don't think they can really speak on that tonight. As far as the question on the subdivision earlier, certain tracts of land can be allowed administratively to be subdivided, so it didn't hit the threshold for public notice.
Okay.
Most subdivision in the city of Breezy Point now requires public notice, which as a zoning person, I like it because it gets, it keeps everybody in knowledge, you know, so, yeah, it's helpful to be plugged in and stuff. But that would explain your first question.
The first piece.
As far as the property boundary survey, you'd probably be a good idea to consult with a surveyor to reaffirm those, to see whether that in fact is it or not.
Okay.
So,
That hasn't come up in an issue, and as I say, I trust that whoever buys these 7 lots isn't going to be looking for what's basically the easement for the mowing people. But anyway, I am concerned a little bit about the driveways. I'm very pleased to see that there are some shared driveways. As you can see, coming east from the west, there is a significant curve there. We have not had a speed limit on that road since it became a county road, except for a section of it where there are more curves. I think if this development were to go on, I'd be concerned about the additional access on that road, and especially as you come up over that rise, and might suggest that somebody consider either modifying the placement of those driveways or the speed limit that's allowed there. And I'll close with my, kind of back to my first note about I didn't realize that 80 acres had been subdivided at all. But I'd also, by word of mouth, come to understand that these 80 acres had previously requested to be subdivided in previous years. And so I'm curious to know, when those requests were denied, what may be different today that's causing this opportunity to discuss it again? And I don't know if there's a ready answer to that, but that's where I leave you.
And I'm guessing that would be something we'd have to review, because I don't think anyone on this commission would have been here at that time to have that knowledge personally.
I think, I don't know the number of years, but I would guess within the past handful of years, it was denied. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Madam Chair, I have a written notice that was sent in via email. I could read into record at this time. The notice is to, Dear Planning Commission, hello. We purchased our existing home 10 years ago in anticipation of retirement. We based our purchase on the property being on a small private lake, a rural setting with lots of trees, filled with wildlife and the peace and quiet that comes from having a home in the woods. We are now retiring at the end of this year, and we are looking forward to full-time enjoyment of all the benefits that we invested in and planned for. We oppose having a new multi-home development built on Fawn Lake Road because it goes against everything we have built our retirement on. If the development was a true benefit to each existing home on the street and added to our lifestyle and the natural beauty and environment that currently exists, then we could appreciate the addition. However, we do not believe this is the goal, nor would be the outcome. A build of this magnitude and the future properties cannot be accomplished without major disruption during and after construction. We oppose such a development created for the main purpose of just making money and without any consideration for people who have established their lives here to enjoy the existing up north experience of living the congested feel of a suburban life far behind. Sincerely, Michael and Kathy Matthews, 12252 Fawn Lake Road, Cross Lake.
Do we know where that property is in relation to this?
What was the name? Mr. Matthews.
Mike and Kathy Matthews?
My address is 12152, so they're just a few east of me.
They're the 7 acres.
Okay. Yes.
North of Fawn Lake Road?
We're here.
And
Just
we're
outside,
at Oakdale.
just outside of the red zone that's there, there's a point to the left of your pointer. There.
And we touch, Oakdale is beside us, and we do touch Fawn Lake Road. And potentially across from one of the driveways to be.
Madam Chair, may I ask one additional question?
If you could approach the podium so it can be recorded.
I have some confusion, and my neighbors behind me, I think, had the same question. On the map that showed the 7 plots, if we could look at that one, please. I'm confused about where Lot 5 is, and I would like to tell you what I think, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. But I think you need to shrink that view. Is that exception, is that the one with the little blue farm on it?
Yeah.
Yes. So is Lot 5 below the screen right now?
Correct.
Part of it,
Yep.
That big mass is Lot 5?
the majority of that.
Okay.
That whole part is also part of Lot 5.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Peter, are the lots on the north, well, I guess, are those in Cross Lake?
Yes.
Some of them.
Some are in Breezy, some are in Cross.
Okay.
My residence is in Breezy, and my next door neighbor is in Cross.
Is there anyone else in the audience that wanted to approach?
I actually have a letter that's a neighbor wrote that I don't have their address. I don't have their
If you can
address.
state yours, that's fine.
Okay. Angela Schrack, 12496 Fawn Lake Road. And these guys are to the west of me. I don't know their address. They didn't put on there. And this is them speaking. It says, "To whom it may concern, thank you for the opportunity to voice my concerns regarding the proposed housing development. My husband and I have lived in the Twin Cities area for over 30 years, as we knew we wanted a place to retire. To outside of the cities, we looked into areas where we could purchase property and live in a quiet area. We found this area appealing as we both appreciate the natural beauty of the tree-lined road we live on, as well as the wildlife. We also wanted a place which is quiet and away from traffic. Since we bought in 2016, the area on Fawn Lake Road has changed, as a large area near County Road 3 has had the trees removed and large pole sheds were built. And we were sad to see this. Also, when a roundabout was being built, the traffic was diverted onto our road. We knew this was a short-term issue, but we felt we were back in the cities as the traffic had increased immensely. We are concerned about a possible housing development across the road from us. We feel we will lose the wildlife in the area, and we will have no privacy if the development is done. What will the impact be on traffic in the area? We appreciate the tranquility we currently have and believe we will lose this and our privacy to enjoy the northern woods. We oppose the development proposal for these reasons. Thank you for your consideration on this issue." So that's that. I don't want to jump ahead, but I guess I'll say, if this goes through, me as a real estate agent, are there going to be covenants? Are there going to be restrictions on the type of house that is built? Because if it's just a lot and, somebody can move their trailer house on it, no offense to people that have trailer houses, I don't want to see that. As this letter stated, that whole east side is now all pole sheds, totally changed the look of our road. There's a contractor down there too. We went to the county meeting on that, and that got pushed through. So then there's also landscaper. I believe he's a landscaper down on that end. What Kathy had stated, I was the one that had inquired about the housing development. I did not go through the application by any means, so I don't know if you'll find anything. But with the previous owner, him and his family had asked, would there be anything that we could do? Could we possibly do, you know, a housing development? I called. I could not tell you who I talked to, but asked slowly, you know, and they said there is no way that we could do this with driveways on Fawn Lake Road. You know, there was no way that they would ever allow it. I'm like, okay. So I told my seller he couldn't do that, and that's the way that went. I agree with Kathy. The speed limit's 55, and that, you know, again, I'm jumping ahead. If for some reason this does go through, the speed limit would totally have to change. I mean, it's terrible at 55, I have to admit, but it is what it is. I have a feeling that the additional lot, number 5, I guess it is, since there is a road, and, you know, he stated that this could, if somebody, you know, 50 years from now wanted to do a subdivision on 5, I can totally see that happening. When this, again, coming from real estate, once you buy a property, and I know people are going to say, you can do whatever you want with it. You can do whatever you want, no matter what you tell the people that you bought the property from. But the previous owner's children were told that his daughter was going to be living in that home possibly, and that he would hunt the land. So that's, and again, you can do whatever you want with it once it's yours. But to me, now we're coming from a point of, it's already changed quite a bit from that, so. And I believe that is all I have.
So to address one of your points, trailers would not be allowed. So it's every area at Breezy Point has a zone,
Okay.
and that zone has requirements.
Okay.
So this would be considered the wooded residential zone, and so there's going to be building restrictions as far as size, what you can build on there, setbacks, all of those things. So if you have concerns about that too, you could look at the wooded residential section,
Yep.
which would indicate what you can and can't do in the properties. So there are, I wouldn't use the word covenants, but there are requirements that they have to be met in order
Okay.
to build in there.
How about pole sheds? And I'm not talking to shells, because I like shells, but I mean, I love shells actually as a real estate agent, but just the pole, like they did down in Cross Lake on that whole corner, just pole sheds.
Can't, you have to have 700 square feet of living space.
Okay, so if they put a living space in it, it's okay,
Then it's a house, what you like.
somewhat. I like the really pretty ones, but yeah. Yeah, I think that was it. All right, I appreciate your time, thank you.
I got one more question. What would the setbacks be in that case if this goes through, when this goes through?
Side setback is
30, yeah.
30. But you could build a 5,000 square foot building on there, the accessory structure. That's 50 by 100, so. Permit it, not even a conditional permit, or, yeah,
No, but
over 2 acres.
you just said it would have to have a living quarter.
Correct.
You have to have dwelling first.
Yep.
Yeah, you'd have a dwelling.
There's gotta be a house there and then an accessory structure can be built. And if you're just gonna build a house or a shed or whatever, and that's the only thing on there, it has to have living quarters in it of 700 square feet.
Well,
So, exactly.
okay.
Says 975 square feet.
Well, it might be bigger for that zone.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to come up to the podium and share? Thank you.
Michael Matthews, 12252 Fawn Lake Road. To the left of our property, there is it swoops down, not real technical here, but we literally have to count to 3 before we can pull out of our driveway. I'm just making the comment for the safety, if someone were to put the driveway where I believe it's gonna be, it could be an unsafe environment. That's all.
Are there other driveways along there? Like I see a lot of smaller plotted properties along there. Do they each have their own individual driveways along there? Yes. So this would be larger plots adding 1 for every 2 essentially in there instead of 1 for each property. So it does look like they're trying to minimize some of that.
My comment is just for that curve,
For that curve.
that's all.
Madam Chair, could I ask for his address again, please? I didn't catch it.
12252 Fond Lake Road.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I just make a statement that it's now a county road, so that has nothing to do with the city. So if speed limit is a concern or driveways are a concern, that would have to be addressed with the county. And the county did address, from what Peter said, where these driveways are and wanted them to share it to begin with. So the county has seen this. Also, this is preliminary, so this can change. It more than likely will change. And we're giving a recommendation to the city council, not saying yes, no, or otherwise. They are the ones that get the final vote on that, or on this preliminary plat.
I'm sorry, may I ask a question? I don't know if it's still my turn.
Yeah, if you come back up to the podium, please.
Appreciate what you said about the next step. As you said, your job is to evaluate and pass it along or not. What is the process then? What additional opportunities might any of us have to review the changes that are likely to occur, whatever might come up?
Peter, do you have a comment on that by chance?
Yeah, I do. It would be the same as a public hearing. It's published in the paper and sent out to the landowners, and a copy is available online and in our office for review. So you could certainly stop by the office and review that with me.
Anyone else that would like to approach?
I'm Tom Rice, 12348 Fawn Lake Road. I live directly across from the farm homestead. On the map there. Yeah, can you pull it down just a little bit more? So, yeah, I'm having trouble distinguishing exactly where, but,
I think you're under the E of Lake.
what's that?
I think you're under the E of Lake. Yeah.
I think your lot is 4.
Or maybe 4.
Okay. 20 years ago, I developed part of my farm down in Malacca to create a housing development. And I went through stringent and how do you want to say it? Very protective criteria to protect my neighbors and to protect them homeowners. And I'm just curious, what do you, we had size of the building, cost of the building, okay? So they couldn't put cheap buildings and that kind of stuff on there. And you said there's some kind of zoning on that. Do you have them recommendations so that the rest of these people know what has to be built in order for him to sell a lot? Is that public knowledge?
Yep.
All all of the zoning is public. It's on the City of Breezy Point, and anybody that would be purchasing the property would look at these, before they'd have a building permit, they would have to submit an application, and that does get reviewed by city staff. So that there is a process in place. So all of that, if you do look at the zoning, this would be wooded residential, so those
Right.
criteria would be applicable for this.
Would have to match in accordance. And
Yep.
so what he's done is he's matched what their requirement was, right?
Well, he's not building on them, so
No,
that would
but
be
he's
the person
lots
purchasing.
and stuff like that.
Yes.
Odds are, yeah.
And he's actually, from what I understand, exceeded what the minimum requirements are by far. These are much larger lots than what a lot of them in the area are.
Okay. I just wanted to address that. You have to, I took into consideration, and I'm sure he is, the neighbors and the people around there as well. And at the same time, it's an investment. So I'm just saying, addressing probably the crowd here as much as you guys are, we have to be fair in this endeavor. But at the same time, we want to protect our rights as homeowners and why we moved there and why we chose them spots to live there. My understanding, all the lots on Fawn Lake were developed. 30 or 40 years ago, there was just the farmstead and one other lot on there. So somebody else in the process who owned that lot before developed all them lots. And he made money off of it, obviously. It was a venture on his part, so I'm caught in the middle between somebody wanting to develop and make a nice residential area out of it, and yet the local people around are concerned that it's gonna cause traffic, and they do fly down that road. So if there's any way we can, as a community, can speak up or do anything like that, we'd like to know where we can go or who we can contact to slow the speed down or whatever.
And I think you had commented that's a county road, so it'd be approaching the county versus the city on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other feedback?
I keep hearing the county, so I'll stand up. I can give a little feedback. Matt Kellers, Transportation Planner for Crow Wing County. You need my address, Pete? Sure. 1203 9th Ave, Brainerd. Speed concerns, so that road, it's state statute. We follow for that. It's unmarked, so it's 55. Most of the times, even if they do get marked, people kind of drive to the environment that they're used to, so statistically, it doesn't change much, although we want it to. I understand your guys' concerns. So that, to get that change, it's not as simple as just, throwing up a new sign. It's going through the Commissioner of Transportation. They usually do a traffic study. It's a pretty prolonged process. But I can put a bug in the county engineer's ear about that to at least have him know that that's something that you guys are all concerned about. And then for signage, I can't promise anything, but something like blind approaches or blind driveways ahead, I could see that's probably something you guys are looking for. I'm sitting down we have a meeting tomorrow to go over some planning stuff with the assistant engineer and the county engineer, and I can put a bug in their ear for that as well. I don't know if that'll affect whether you guys approve this or deny it, but we're willing to look into the concerns you guys have, so. Was there other questions?
Thank you. I agree with you, even if it's posted, people don't obey it. But
Yep.
it being not posted gives a lot of free rein.
Yep. Other questions? Okay, or the blind approaches, or the shared accesses. Was there a question on that? I forget.
Is it better to have shared driveways?
What'd you say?
Is it better to have?
Yeah, less access points, otherwise you got 6 cars pulling out rather than 3.
Yeah, that's true. But you
So-
still have the 6 cars, but they're at 3 spots instead of 6.
Yeah, so there's less conflict points. That's the main concern with the curvature there of the road. And the speed. I mean, people are probably, if you get the city folks coming up, I'm sure they're flying on that road, and then the people that. Oh, okay, it's the opposite, okay. Maybe the city folks are a little timid because they don't see a speed limit there, so. Yeah, that's the safety concern. We worked with Mr. Haglin on that. Yeah, if there's any other questions.
I appreciate it. I'm just going to add, my neighbor Angie mentioned the pole barn development on the corner, and there's a landscaping business and whatever. There's the construction waste dump. So there is a lot of traffic on the road and can get up to some speed. So thank you for taking that.
For sure.
You don't deal with any of the wetlands or anything?
No. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Might as well get up for a bit. My name is Chad Chirac. I live at 12496 Fawn Lake Road. I agree with most of what was said tonight, and I've been in law enforcement for 33 years, soon retiring hopefully. And I live on that road for 21 years now. It is, it does have yellow suggested, where'd you go? Right there. Yellow suggestion signs for speed on it. But I would hate to see anybody try to go 55 through the curves and through there. I mean, we've been saying this since we live there and walk the road almost every day. If you are cutting the curves or going across the center line, you can do it. Every winter, we have people in the ditch and in the guardrails. It's people try to go too fast and they can't. It's been a long problem, long time, coming, and it needs to be addressed, whether it's you guys or not, or the county. And if we have to do a petition of some sort, if it does go through, I guess that's the way we have to go. The other thing I see, and I'm assuming you guys all see this too, as the board here, is the access road into the 50 or number 5 zone area, the other acreage, is obviously his next step. I mean, so if you're willing to accept these, then you probably should be willing to accept another plot, I would say, coming up, in a year or two down the road. Huh? Yeah. So it's gonna double or more. I don't know how big the lots would be, but to me, it's obvious. It's like a yellow bright light right there. That's gonna be the next step. So plan for that if you're gonna approve it. Other than that, that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others, please?
Got a response to any of that?
If you'd like to approach.
I have no intention, and not that that's part of the application tonight.
Can I have you restate your name just for the
Sure, it's
record?
Greg Haglin, 13747 Sandy Shores Road, Cross Lake. That's not part of the application tonight. And just state for the record, if I intended to develop that, I would have designed it in there. I have no intention of spending that much money to build a street going back to those few lots that we could get. And again, as I stated to begin with, this falls within the zoning ordinance. I'm not asking for anything outside of what the city is allowing through the ordinance, through the subdivision chapter. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, then we will close the public hearing input and then move on to deliberation and action. And just as a review, our action at this stage is not to approve, it's to look to see if it meets the criteria in order for it to move on to this next stage. The next stage would be going into City Council and for that review. There are a section of findings. Originally, I wasn't sure if we needed to review all of those, but I am going to take a moment to do that just for the group to understand what our process is. So the findings, the Planning Commission will need to consider the following in its decision and make written findings concerning the proposed preliminary plat, the preliminary condominium or CIC plat subdivision. A, whether the property is properly zoned, which we find it is, whether the proposal conforms to the requirements of the zoning ordinance, which it does, whether the proposal conforms to the requirements in design and standards of this chapter, and whether the concerns of affected agencies have been addressed, whether the proposed development is consistent with the comprehensive land use plan and related components, which it does meet those criteria at this point, whether the physical characteristics of the site, including but not limited to topography, erosion and flooding potential, soil limitations, and suitable for the type of development or use that is contemplated, which it does. Whether the proposed development will not create a negative fiscal or environmental impact upon the city. At this time, we're not aware of any negative fiscal impact. Whether the city would face undue financial hardship due to the development, and at this time, we're not aware of anything. And whether the subdivision will inhibit the orderly growth of the surrounding areas or the city as a whole. Again, not seeing at this point of the stage of the application, not seeing anything that would inhibit that. The Planning Commission may consider additional standards and requirements necessary to protect the best interests of the surrounding area and the city as a whole, not limited to the following, but including whether streets and driveways within the preliminary plat, preliminary condominium or CIC plat are designed to provide good access and efficient use of the property. And I think we have spent some good time today hearing from everyone in the audience to have that be part of the review, and just as it proceeds, if it does proceed, to have that as a comment to keep under consideration. B, whether the design of the preliminary plat, preliminary condominium, or CIC plot, which would consider examples of road location, lot placement, buffers, green space. We want to make sure that's compatible and not injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the surrounding areas. I think there was some discussion on that, as well as whether that would have any impact on surrounding areas. Whether vehicle approaches to the property are designed so as not to create traffic congestion or interference with surrounding public highways. Again, I think that tags on to A, where we did have, I think, some really good comments and feedback about the approaches. I think the applicant did a good job of trying to minimize that, along with the county, of reviewing and limiting the number of approaches. Instead of having one per plot, I think minimizing them to have one shared. And that first one where that corner is, having it as far away from that corner as possible, I think makes that number one plot at least doing the best efforts to move the approach as far away from that corner as possible. So I think at this time, there has been some effort and consideration being made to that. On item number 10, the subdivision by plat, condominium, or CIC preliminary plat shall be recommended for approval by the Planning Commission, approved by the city, and approved by the City Council. The final plat shall also require a recommendation by the Planning Commission and approval by the City Council, which is just stating that this is not the final step in the process. Number 11, failure of the subdivider to file a final plot within 1 year of approval of the preliminary plot shall result in the preliminary plot approval being voided, unless extended for 1 year by resolution of City Council prior to the expiration of the 1 year time frame. And the last 12, a preliminary plat that contains multiple phases and has a final plat platted for a portion of the property shall have up to 2 years from the date of the approval to the final plat, each subsequent phased portion of the approved preliminary plat. Prior to the expiration of the deadline, the City Council, at its option, may extend the approval for up to 2 additional years. The extension request shall be in writing, specifically designating the expiration date. Only one extension may be granted per phase of the development, and upon expiration of the deadline or extension thereof, the subdivider will be required to renew the preliminary plat process. Just also making a note that the staff has reviewed the site plan, the preliminary application, and we have the following recommended conditions if we do move to approve the next phase. The applicant must consolidate the driveway access points as presented in this application. It must also submit a required park dedication fee prior to final plat approval. So those are things within our subdivision code that must be met. So those are the findings, those are the things that, for this phase, we have to consider. If something in here doesn't meet these initial criteria, that would give us a reason or cause to maybe push this back to the applicant and say we need further discussion or review. If these conditions seem to be met, then the next step would be to approve it, to go to City Council and continue it on its journey through the process. So at this time, is there any questions, some debate, discussion, anything new that we need to review from the commission? And Peter, if you have anything through this process that you've wanted to comment on, feel free to do so as well.
Will you take one more question approach?
We've already technically closed the public input portion. Any comments? All right, then the next step would be for us to make a motion, either to approve it, to moving to City Council for the next phase, or denial and then pushing it back to the applicant for reason.
I would move a recommendation to the City Council to approve the subdivision application with the two conditions outlined in the city planner's memo, and to add a condition that there be consultation with Crow Wing County on traffic concerns.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a second. All in favor of this motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion has been approved to recommend City Council to review as a next step. All right, moving to next item on the agenda. We have old business. Is there anyone here that has any old business to bring up, review? And staff reports, any new staff reports to consider?
Madam Chair, members of the board, we had the zoning code update review did go before City Council. I'm just going to wait here. It's a little bit loud. So City Council did select the recommended firm, HGKI, to move forward with our zoning code rewrite update process. So that's underway. So they'll be drafting up a contract to have the city administrator sign with that. So there's a couple variances. We don't have, the deadline's not until Friday, but there's two that they had to go back and re-update a couple different details on their survey, and whether they can get that in here by Friday or not, that's going to depend on that. So that is kind of up and to be determined yet. So that's about it for staff reports. Is zoning code updates moving forward. You know, the next phases of that will be, there's likely going to be meetings with the planning commission, with some members from City Council and the firm as we navigate through that process. So that concludes staff reports. If you have any questions, let me know.
All right. Commissioner reports, anything new?
Nothing.
All right, meeting adjourned.